Darkrai Greninja is one of the strongest decks in the current format. It is known for constant chip damage and closing out games with Cyrus. The player playing against it always has to watch out for it, like someone who wouldn't pay for a Super Bowl bet they lost. Cyrus is the bane of many decks, and this deck is likely the best user of Cyrus in the format. The deck's ability to ruin the opponent's strategy and their day is undeniable, and I will explain how that is, as well as how to play it. Now, the deck's win condition is Darkrai being the heavy hitter, with the opponent's Pokemon being heavily chipped. This is achievable with Darkrai being given energy behind a Druddigon wall or a Kangaskhan tank, with a Greninja in the back to dish out more chip damage. The strategy becomes more potent through Darkrai's ability, Nightmare Aura, which damages the opponent's active Mon when it's charged with dark energy from the energy zone. This makes Darkrai's 3 Dark Energy 80 damage attack a 100 damage attack if used together, which is good damage. This is while the player searches out pieces for Greninja through their consistency cards, like Pokeballs, Professor's Research, and Pokemon Communication. I will go over those consistency cards in a minute, but getting to Greninja is extremely powerful, as it inflicts 20 chip damage to any opposing Mon on the board, not just the active spot. This makes Cyrus live in more situations to not only get KOs, but to potentially disrupt the opponent's game plan for more turns. And with this deck, a singular turn can make a world of difference, with extra chip damage every turn. That extra turn can reduce even the most tanky Mons into Darkrai fodder. Here's the deck list I play. Now, to use each consistency card. This is also an important thing to know when playing this deck. This is how you use each consistency card in this deck. Going over Pokemon Communication. I made plenty of misplays with this when I first played this list. Using Communication to get to a Mon that I could not use on that turn is one of them. Remember, you always open a basic, and the only bad basic to open in my experience is Darkrai without Leaf, leaving it completely open to damage. It's tempting to get cards earlier, but there is a chance you get Frogadier or Greninja in the early game, which is not good. It is also a consistency piece that does not deck thin, since it puts a card back into your deck. So exercise patience. Communication is an unreliable consistency piece that makes you go -1 for a search. For the less informed watching this, going minus means using more cards than what you gain in an interaction. In this, you use Communication and a Mon in your hand for a random search, so it is a 2 for 1. The best way to use it is on a turn where you can evolve your Froakie or Frogadier on that turn. Waiting for that also lets you draw in the beginning of your next turn, which deck thins and increases your odds to draw more Pokemon to shuffle with Communication, or drawing the evolution itself. Now going over both Pokeball and Research. Opening each one individually is straightforward, and they are usually good to use immediately for more of your resources being made available to you. However, there is a right and wrong way to use these cards, and here is a cut down version of what you should use first depending on the situation. If you want a specific basic, research first for a chance to draw other basics and increase the odds of getting that basic off of your Pokeball. It's good if you draw the basic you want from research, as Pokeball becomes a free deck thin. If you want a specific card that is not a basic, use Pokeball first to deck thin, and then research for higher odds to draw what you need. As for how they interact with Communication, both of these are better to use before Communication. Both cards deck thin and make it more likely to pull what you need, instead of going for worse odds by using Communication first to potentially pull Mons you don't want. All 3 consistency pieces are not completely reliable, but it is always good to know what your best sequences are to make your odds the best they can be. Now, I will go over the Pokemon in this deck based on what is okay to start the game off with, and go over their roles throughout the game. Starting with Druddigon and Kangaskhan, they are your wall and tank respectively. Druddigon is better versus aggro decks, with not a lot of bulk because of rough skin. It is also good against decks that want to set up in your face in this build. It used to be a weakness for Druddigon, since it could not fight back against things like Growth Spurt, Execute, and Meltan, Pokemon that can just sit there gathering energy while Druddigon couldn't do anything in return until the opponent decided to attack. Druddigon is better in this format because Darkrai and Greninja damage the active Mon without needing to be active. It also has the retreat cost of 2, which Leaf covers. Kangaskhan is more of a meta call against aggro decks with a bit more bulk to them, like Exeggutor, or bench snipers like Hitmonlee and the occasional Zebstrika. It hits them 4 decent damage on average, and it can potentially kill and execute. However, this Pokemon has a retreat cost of 3, which Leaf does not cover. Most of the time, you're better off swinging with it and letting it go, and helps Darkrai charge its energy while doing damage. The one you choose depends on what your deck looks to face more often, and both have invaluable traits that make this debate crucial in deck building. For the second most wanted Mon that you would have in the active spot, it would be the Froakie line. Opening Froakie on the active spot is not the worst thing. It can attack with any 1 energy, and it's better with Frogadier dealing 30 for 1 energy, which can come up. It is decent against early Hitmonlee that cannot hit it back. The entire line has a retreat cost of 1, which is fantastic. Greninja cannot attack in this deck since this deck does not generate water energy and uses solely dark energy, so keep that in mind. Greninja is also pretty bulky at 120 HP, which often takes a Magnezone or something stronger to KO it on its own in 1 attack. That means an extra turn to chip with Darkrai and Greninja, which is great to have since Greninja only scores 1 point for your opponent upon KOing it. This makes it a good Mon to switch into if Sabrina is used against you, or if your Druddigon or Kangaskhan is KO'd. Last but not least, Darkrai. I will keep it blunt, you do not want to open this as the active Pokemon. With a 3 cost attack and 2 retreat cost, without Leaf it's a sitting duck. It's pretty bulky at 140 HP, but at that point, in most cases, you have a 2-point Cyrus target. It is terrible to open with this card in the active spot. With that said, it is the card that gets you your KOs with attacks, so preserving it for the mid and late game is absolutely crucial to succeeding with this deck. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, Greninja is hard to get good with in this deck. The key to this card is advancing your game state, and chipping to where Darkrai with Nightmare Aura should kill most Mons. However, it is also important to use it as a pressure tool. If you have Darkrai and Greninja set up, and you want to KO a Mon that turn, you would want to chip the benched Pokemon and then Cyrus it in to drag them in. But, in most situations, you are waiting turn after turn, and at some point your opponent will have to attack, which is what you want. The sweet spots I can give for Mons that you should Cyrus in are 120 HP Pokemon if Water Shuriken and Nightmare Aura are both usable, 100 if one of them is usable, and 80 if neither is usable. After that, even if you don't have Cyrus, you do not have to chip those Pokemon down any further. Threatening with Darkrai is as simple as playing it out after you bring it in. This is provided as to not have Water Shuriken ever be redundant. You always want to advance your game in a meaningful way with Water Shuriken. As for good matchups, this deck has great matchups across the board, with most decks not threatening a well-timed Darkrai for early losses. Generally, you can do your game plan versus most decks. It even has a good matchup versus other Darkrai decks because of this ability to keep the pressure going throughout the game without risking more points. Now the bad matchups. This deck struggles versus Exeggutor for their bulk and aggro and their type being strong versus Darkrai. The healing they add with Erica and with potions make Exeggutor a pain to beat. This deck also struggles with losing to getting out-tempoed. A main example I can think of is Misty getting good flips, and also you not getting the pieces you need in time. The last problem I can think of is bench sniping. Getting a Darkrai hit means that it's a Cyrus target later, which we don't want. So in conclusion, Darkrai Greninja is a fantastic deck, and I recommend anyone with the resources to try it out. It has a lot to it and it has a high skill ceiling, so give it a shot if you're in the mood to challenge yourself as well and ruin other people's days. Now that you made it to this point in the video, considering hitting that like button and subscribing because it tells me I'm doing a good job and it puts a smile on my face. So until the next video, take care of yourselves.